Hello, in this chapter we'll be looking at the 3 bishop f4 theory. I hope that you enjoy. Okay, d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, c5. Okay, e3, just to quickly run through the alternatives. We could play something like c4, but it doesn't defend against our threat of c takes d4. Absolutely taking over the center. We can win the pawn, there'd be knight d5 coming up. It's just too easy. Queen d4 doesn't help because of knight c6, and taking on d5 allows knight takes d5 with the tempo on the bishop. Basically, white needs to either defend his pawn or take ours, and he usually defends it with e3. Okay, but I have to cover the sidelines. Knight c3. Okay, you can just make any developing move. It doesn't matter. But the threat is c takes d4. So again, after queen takes d4, knight c6, black is doing very well. The queen has to move again. The pawn majority is rolling forward, attacking the opponent's pieces. And the bishop on f4 is a target. For example, something like this. Well, I guess there'd be the immediate queen a5 check, which picks up the knight, but otherwise, there's also knight d5. Okay, what else is there? There'd be d takes c5, but as usual, we just win the pawn back. White can't do that much. The f4 bishop's a target. We're going to play knight c6, queen e7, e5, easy development. And white's doing okay. I mean, like, he can equalize with the c4 break at the right time, and we have the choice between either taking at the symmetrical-ish position or letting him take with a pretty favorable isolated queen's pawn. But it's, you know, easy equality, and white's the one who has to prove it. So let's say something like b4, but again, protecting the pawn doesn't do that much. You just attack the base of the pawn chain, take, and knight c6 or b6, and white can't maintain the pawn. Something like bishop d2 allows knight e4. We're gonna target the rook with queen f6. We have knight takes d2 at any point. The b4 pawn is a weakness. b6 is always an idea. Easy development, good compensation, and almost definitely winning the pawn back. Pretty typical stuff. As always, there's, like, you know, just normal moves. You can get compensation. You can play for b6. It's just same as with the queen's gambit, except for white. You can't maintain the pawn if you capture it. So, all right, let's go back. Instead of d takes c5, let's look at c3, or c3. Well, what's the idea of c3? Well, the difference is maybe white will take it and play b4, and hopefully his pawn chain, from white's point of view, will make sure that the pawn can actually be kept, unlike e3. But it doesn't really do that much. But you might as well learn how to play against it, because there's a few concrete deviations on the way to our typical anti-London tabia, where we have queen b6, bishop f5, space advantage, massive initiative. There's a few early deviations you may want to know, though you don't need to, and a few concrete lines that you may want to know against experts and masters and very well-prepared players, but for the most part, this should be pretty straightforward. Very, very thematic. So as usual, central pawn majority, easy development, trying to win the pawn back. And the only critical line is essentially b4, protecting it, because, I mean, free pawn is free pawn, right? And also this bishop's a target, so b4, a5, not forced, you have other moves, but a5 is very typical. Just attack the base of the pawn chain, and white doesn't have any good moves. b5 allows knight e7, and we're going to grab that pawn back with a better center. Queen b3 isn't that helpful either, because after exchanging knight e4, the bishop on f4 and the rook on a1 is weak. We can always target that pawn chain with pawn to b6. As always, we can just capture b4 with check. b5 allows knight a5, gaining a tempo and targeting c5, and there's always the pawn majority and easy development in reserve, whereas white is not very well developed, especially on the king side. So, okay, so knight d4 is also possible. Very typical idea, actually. We're going to see this in the 5-knight bd2 theory section later, but the gist of it is white wants to take on c6 so that we can't recapture on b4. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because black has excellent compensation anyway, even without variations. I mean, after all, a fantastic center, a couple open files on the queen side, but I want to play concretely. Let's use that center. And I noticed 2 undefended pieces. What was it, John Nunn, who said LPDO, or a useful way of finding tactics? Loose pieces drop off. After knight g4, there would be queen to f6, targeting the bishop, targeting the rook, and e5, targeting the bishop. The London bishop is a target. Not only is white's queenside pawns often a target in some positions, okay, kind of a bad example here because the pawn chain's preventing it, but you know what I mean, right? But also the bishop's a target, and this is not what white wants. I could end here. I could have ended a long time ago and just said, well, in general, we'll capture the c5 pawn and white can lose time protecting it and we have a5. Okay, whatever. Might as well show you a few variations to actually crush your opponents. I mean, it's not like it takes hardly any effort to actually learn properly with Chessable, and I'm sure that you, and I mean you specifically, of course in general, can easily learn all of these lines using Chessable's methods. And of course, you're always welcome to ask questions in the comments. I'd be happy to help with your learning experience. As of now, I'm quite active. Okay, so let's say bishop g3 because you don't want a hanging bishop. Well, too bad, your rook is still hanging. Knight d2, h5, targeting that terrible London bishop. I guess the alternative is to have it locked up like a French, but we don't talk about that. Okay, and then, all right, well, maybe you should try to pause, solve, and find the best move for black here. For those of you who know about the rook postulate, this should be quite easy. Okay, hope you found it. Rook a3, all thanks to Sean Vibert in his postulate. We're going to take that bishop and checkmate the opponent. Something like e3 isn't helping because, oh, not knight f2. Although knights are useless, so you can sort of get rid of your knight if you want to. And here we have rook takes g3 or bishop a6 with an easily winning position. Too easy, but common themes. Just anyway, you don't need to know all this theory. It's just illustrative variations. Knight d2, I mean, there's like no games here anyway. Just target the opponent's pieces, dominant center, free initiative, tempo, tempo, tempo. Yeah, okay, whatever. What else is there? Queen d4. Okay, we can maneuver the bishop, target the queen, but we can also crush the opponent differently with another pawn sacrifice, and the queen's a target, and the king's a target, and the rook's a target, and they're all on dark squares, which, well, we have a dark squared bishop and they don't, so no surprise there. Our golden bishop is our better bishop, as Yakov Norowitz would put it. And black is doing absolutely fantastic, as you would expect. We're facing London. So let's see. Okay, I'm joking, obviously, but I mean, it's not that hard to learn these lines. So let's say something like e3. We've already looked at all the alternatives. Knight c6, and the gist of it is we have this space advantage. White needs to play concretely. We've talked about this in the introduction. dc5 e6 takes. Knight bd2 is the best move, and the reason for that is if we go for this pawn and he takes on c5, we can't grab c3 on the way home. We'll get back to this. After c3, queen b6, black is better. Black is, and the reason why black is better is because his queen is stronger, there's a lead in development, and a space advantage. So white needs to play concretely. Something slow like queen c1 isn't much help. After bishop f5, it's just too easy. The queen's going to be on the open file, which we could open at any point. There's easy development with e6, bishop e7, castles, rook c8, pretty simple. We can play h6 to make sure we have a escape square for our bishop. And, well, okay, simple enough. Queen c2 is also possible, and it's actually quite a strong move. I would like you to pause and find out why black is not able to play bishop f5 like he could in the queen b3, c4 lines. Alright, I hope you found it. Bishop f5 doesn't work here because of d takes c5. If white took on f5, then queen takes b2 should win, because at e6 followed by taking the trapped rook. But after d takes c5, if black takes, well, the b2 pawn isn't hanging, so we drop the bishop. And after bishop takes c2, takes, and knight a3, it's a playable position for black, but it's certainly not very comfortable because this is an outpost and white had gained a tempo, in my opinion. Okay, so black should play something else. There's plenty of moves. g6 is one of them, just saying, well, I'm going to play bishop f5 anyway. And okay, you're equal. That's what the main recommendation of the course. I don't like it too much, not in every way, because the bishop on g7 is hitting a rock, or as Yakov would put it, a mini bishop. White's built quite well on the dark squares right now. I would much rather the bishop go somewhere else, but it's perfectly playable. If you want to play something else, there's also bishop g4 followed by e6, and there's a concrete line I recommended in knight h5, and someone complained in the reviews, there's too much long theory in this course. Well, he's right with this one variation, but it's an alternative, so relax, okay? Okay, anyways, it's fine. The gist of it is we're going to try to grab that bishop pair and play in the center. More ways to play for the initiative, and okay, technically white has a bunch of concrete ideas, and if two computers play each other, and white gets this concrete counterplay because, you know, otherwise we're going to grab that bishop with easy development, dominant center. I guess white can come pretty close to equalizing, but it's just really complicated tactics that are hard to follow, and this is just a crazy sample variation that I kind of like black. I mean, black is the initiative, white's king is wandering around. Not that that's a bad thing, you know, king postulate, but at the end of the day, this long and confusing line that I could pretend to understand, black ends up with a better endgame, but not by very much. Yeah, sorry, a little bit of a cough there. Yeah, I'm not going to try to even explain this line. You can ask questions in the notes if you want. I'm not going to explain it because the gist of it is already, pretty simple. You want to grab the bishop pair, you want to play in the center. White plays tactically in order to not be much worse. And you don't need to play this way at all because you can just fiend cut out your bishop in bishop f5 with easy equality or play bishop g4. Like even in the tactical lines, black generally has a pretty simple alternative. White's the one who needs to prove that he's fine. Okay, what else is there? I guess technically there's b3, but then white's behind in development, and I mean this queen is out, and black has a little bit of a space advantage, and I suppose this weakens the dark squares, and that'll matter later because we can always exchange, and c3 is kind of weak, and this knight needs to develop. Maybe we'll play a5, a4 at some point, eventually. And I want my bishop on g4 to fight for the dark squares, because exchanging on f3 would be light. I'm investing light for dark. Yakov Norowitz would say, the bishop is worth $1,000 on the color it's on, and a knight is worth $500 on light and $500 on dark. So I would be investing $1,000 of light money for $500 of light and $500 on dark. But dark investments have gone up in value after white played b3 because it permanently weakens the dark squares on the queen side. Okay, for more details, check out Yakov Norowitz and his Dacha Academy. Okay, so International Master Yakov. Also, like, he's such a good friend, and 3000chess.com Blitz too. What a guy! He's such a nice guy, and good bagels too. And his coach Roman, he really introduced it. Anyway, we'll get back to some chess. Queen b3. I know a lot of this is reviewed from the introduction, but I'm going to go in a little more detail. c4. White can choose between retreating and having, basically a worse position here. Just simple chess, easy development, pawn storm on the queen side, and if you swap off the A and B pawns for white's B and C pawns, then you have a passed C4 pawn against isolated A2 pawn. The position plays itself eventually, and hopefully you can get a lot of easy victories when you with the free pawn storm. Yeah, just simple chess. We're going to talk about that in more detail in the model games section. Okay, so queen takes f5, queen b2, blah blah blah, trap the rook. What else is there? Queen b6, a b6, and this pawn storm plan is really important, and we can do it even at the expense of development because the position is closed, and because if we wait too long, the opponent will prevent it by playing a3, knight d2, and rook c1. Black will still be better, but we might as well get what we can and undouble the pawns. Say something like knight bd2, b5, bishop f5 is not as strong, because after a3, b5, rook c1, your b4 is not possible before it would have been because the rook is undefended, LPDO, but black is still better. Kind of a cool long-term idea might be maneuvering the knight to a4. b5, b4, and fall, you're pinned, ha 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 ha. Okay, also there's the threat of knight takes c2, and, black still has that free space advantage on the queen side. White's pawns are kind of weak after the pawn reaches b4, and easy development as well. No counterplay. Ha ha ha, maybe you should have played a better opening, white. Okay, knight a3, well, okay, there's a lot of moves here that are good. The idea of knight a3 is it prevents b5, but I don't care. You can sack the exchange if you want to go crazy. I mean, it actually works. Black is at least even, but, I don't see the need. You can just play bishop f5, and the general plan is play e6. Your bishop is outside the pawn chain. You prevented the e4 break. The a3 knight is weak, and we're going to capture it soon with the bishop on f8, unless he plays knight b5 at some point. But knight b5 is not much help because after rook a5, the knight's kind of trapped, and after a4, we can even play bishop c2. And one of my national master opponents resigned here in this position online, realizing that he's losing a pawn, and the pawn storm continues. Oops. Okay. It's possible to also just develop, but, I mean, you're targeting the knight b5, rook a5, just simple chess and free space advantage. Nothing really helps. Always target the knight. You can always defend the b6 pawn. These positions are too easy, and even concrete play doesn't help that much. As usual, black has plenty of good options. Nothing wrong with that, but why not surprise the opponent? Build a mini bishop. Light rebuilders. Yakov would say, you would like to build your pieces and pawns together in harmony. The pawns are the bricks, the pieces are the builders, and we're here to build a dacha. so that we can live in, okay, I don't know. It's fun. So all of our pawns will be on light squares, which means that the light squares are protected and strong, and not in the way of our bishop. Also, his light square bishop is restricted, and after e6, we're going to capture that a5 knight. As usual, knight b5 or k5 is okay, and black had plenty of other choices. Just an illustrative line. Should take about 5 minutes to learn the basic London ideas, and the rest is if you want to know more, I suppose. And with Chessable, it's very easy to drill the variations. I'm confident that you could learn all these variations if you want to. Again, as you're welcome to ask questions in the notes if you're unsure of anything. Okay, so that was pretty simple. Knight b2. We've moved on from the London system to the London attack, Indrik K style, although he's not the only one. 5 knight b2 is one of the moves that makes the London actually playable, if white's willing to play precisely. Kind of reminds me of a funny story. So there was this one guy who had a question for the Quality Chess blog, and he was like, so I'm kind of interested in the London system. I like the London. Can you guys, I love your Quality Chess books. I love your Grandmaster preparation. Can you please make a London system book? And some international master, sorry, I forget who, responded with something along the lines of, I'm sorry, at Quality Chess we recommend good openings. If you want to know how to learn how to equalize as white in the London, there's 2 books on the topic by New in Chess, and you're welcome to go there. He has a point. I absolutely agree with him that white probably can equalize in the London if he's accurate and is willing to play concretely, and not as a system. The London system fails to this c5 setup with queen b6 after both knights, and the London attack has a chance. I'll grant you that. I'm not going to say the conclusion of the debate yet. The debate may be still ongoing, but the London attack requires theory. White absolutely needs to know theory to equalize. Okay, knight b2, bishop f5. Why bishop f5? Wasn't I trying to go both knights and then queen b6? Well, here's why. The immediate queen b6 allows white to be concrete with d takes c5. And the plan is, well, we didn't grab a pawn on the way home, for one thing. And the other thing is, bishop b5 is possible, white has a lead in development, and these positions are fine. Shanklin recommends it. Black can also play e6, and there's nothing wrong with this approach. I would just rather surprise opponents with bishop f5, or at least that's what I recommended. I'm able to play both of these. I kind of like Shanklin's lines, to be honest. Okay, but bishop f5, well, what's wrong with this? Nothing seems wrong with it at a glance, right? I mean, we're going to target that c2 pawn, so we can maybe play queen b6 under better circumstances, right? Like, if white plays c3, then after queen b6, d takes c5, queen takes b2, it's like, well, they don't have rook b1. We could take on c3, and okay, technically white can still stay in the game with knight d4 and some concrete mumbo-jumbo, but like nobody plays this way, and it's also very non-threatening, theoretically speaking. Okay, well, what else is there? Something else concrete? Yes, white needs concrete play repeatedly, because these endgames are just better for black. Pawn storm, space advantage, and everything else is symmetrical, so just free advantage for black. Too easy. Okay, but anyways, white can play concretely, I suppose. Something like knight h4, and alright, we go back, and we're still targeting b2, and wait a second here. Didn't I say when we don't have bishop f5, we don't go c4? Alright, this is a bit of an exception. The knight's misplaced, we'll get back to this in a moment. But, okay, if we're uncomfortable with this, endgame's still okay. But I know I said that these endgames generally favor the side who has the doubled pawns, right? Well, it's not quite the same. Black has a space advantage here, so the pawn storm isn't going to be as effective as if white took on b6, because pawn being on c4 means the pawn storm comes a lot more easily, and plus black can try to grab the bishop pair here. But even so, I don't like it. White can take on c5 one day with b4, b5. There's play down the a file. Black's at least even, but I prefer not to go for this. c4, queen c2, knight h5. Let's grab that bishop. We're going to play concretely, fight for the initiative. And okay, there's simple moves. There's like, well, I don't want to play simple chess. White's going to play for e4. I'd rather just go for a big initiative right off the bat. Target that knight, tempo, and then, I don't know, I got the bishop pair. I can castle queenside. The position's ridiculously imbalanced, and white did not get his, oh, I'm going to escape theory with some sort of a London system approach. That's just not how it works. You get your fun positions. And probably objectively, black is better too. At least that's what my engine at a high depth told me, and I've had success at this position. So, okay, what else is there? I have to pretend like this is a concrete course and not just how to set up a crushing position when the opponent doesn't play concretely, which they usually don't, at least at club level. Talking too fast again. Sorry, I'm remembering the Perpetual Chess podcast interview with Ben Johnson a couple years ago, and he was telling me, Elijah, speaking with you is like drinking water from a fire hose. Please remember to slow down. Okay. Thank you, Ben. I'm going to slow down now. Okay. Bishop b5, some sort of queen b6, dc4 is fine, easy. Okay, I'm going to take first to keep it simple, I guess, and knight d4, again, better center. e4, queen b6, that bishop's a target. And, okay, technically we could have also played queen b6 here. Okay, well, I don't want to cover every side. I mean, the sidelines nobody ever plays them, essentially, so... double pawns, I guess, easy development, worth the threat? I don't see it. And on some random move, like 6 bishop e2 after e6 or something, it's like, what's going on here? Well, I see a better knight. I see a space advantage. I guess white's probably okay. I mean, he could play c4 at some point, but to say the least, black has no problems. Okay, so d takes c5, e6, and, well, wait, hold on. dc5? Black gets the central pawn majority, so what's the issue? Well, the issue is 2 of them, I guess. Otherwise, this is just not very good. Well, there's a few. Knight b3, for example, protects it, but we don't care because we can just win it back. Black has pretty simple development, and he's doing fine. I guess technically white can do another concrete move like b4, but, I mean, I'm not too concerned with this. Black can block with the knight or block with knight c6, and, I mean, it's pretty easy development still. There's essentially no games here. Although if you have further questions about any of these variations, you're welcome to ask in the comments or reviews section. So knight d4, bishop takes c5. Well, the threat is knight takes c6 and b4, which we looked at earlier as an idea. That's why I don't want to retreat the bishop, and also because of bishop b5. So bishop c5, and all right, fair enough, Indrik K. and your London attack course. This is a critical position. It's a critical position. It's quite imbalanced. Black has a lead in development. Black has rebuilt the light squares, a mini bishop of sorts. Good complement for his dark squared bishop, playing against the opponent's bishop pair. Alright, there's an isolated pawn on d4, but it's also an isolated queen's pawn, which means that you have the space advantage to compensate, and maybe you'll exchange it one day. Alright, there's some double pawns, but I again, like the space advantage, and I like the outpost on e4. So what's going on here? I mean, it's a very imbalanced position. I believe black is doing totally fine. And I think you can kind of end here in practice, at least at club level, but because Indrik K decided to, or in his London attack, decided to analyze deeper, so will I. c3, castles, bishop e2, rook e8. Okay, I'll grant that after knight e4, knight takes e4, d takes e4, white is getting some initiative. There's a tempo with the rook d1, so rook e8, I guess. Castles. Okay, this is just a sample position. It's like, the gist of it is easy centralization. Sometimes you target that f4 bishop with h6 g5. Knight e4 is always an idea, but we sometimes wait until they move the knight, or until they move the bishop to a square where it'll get hit with tempo when you recapture. Oh, right, I need to talk slowly. Hello, we're going to be talking slowly again. Okay, so a sample variation like a4, d4. Okay, there's calm moves too, but I like crazy chess. Technically, if white had taken it, you can just get all sorts of crazies, because, you know, we're in the London system, which obviously means we're going to get a fun position with all of our pieces developed, obviously. Yeah, this is fun. Okay, sample position, whatever. Long story short, easy development, open the center, play for a big attack. I don't know. Chess is crazy. I mean, I'm just playing for the initiative here. This critical position, black has a lead in development. So again, I don't see what the issue is. And okay, let's say you're concerned that the engine says slightly better for white. Okay, let's follow the engine analysis then and see if it leads anywhere. It doesn't, by the way. Yeah. Okay, and yeah, white needs to keep the bishop protected or have it move, I guess. And yay, knight e4. So now Indrik's idea doesn't really do as much because we have a tempo and it's too easy to develop our pieces. So knight takes e4. Well, I mean, it's just development, right? If white's just going to sit around, black will develop his pieces, centralize everything, absolutely no targets, and g5 is coming. Wait, did I say I'd talk slower? Maybe a cup of tea would help. Sorry guys. Chess is too exciting, especially on Chessable. I can't slow down even if I tried, it seems. I would need someone like Sean Vibert or Yakov Norowitz to calm me down, maybe. Or Timur Gurayev. He tells me I need to slow down. He keeps reminding me when I showed him some of my YouTube videos. Alright, Timur, I'll try to slow down. Thank you very much. Okay. Knight takes e4, and... Okay, just simple chess. Develop all your pieces, target his bishop. The London bishop's weak as usual, and, I mean, white would actually be lost if it weren't for this tactic saving the day. So, even in the critical lines... Well, okay, let's summarize. First things first. White cannot afford to play just any line. You're going to play queen b6, target b2, have a space advantage. You often pawn storm the queen side, get some good endgames. Simple chess. If white takes on c5, you get the pawn back. And pretty big initiative too in a lot of cases. So if white wants to be okay, he needs to play concretely, and probably the most critical line is knight bd2, with the idea of meeting queen b6 with dc5 and rook b1. That's a line that's perfectly reasonable for black, and Shanklin recommends it in his excellent semi-Slav course. I am not personally recommending queen b6 as the primary move in this course. I would prefer bishop f5, and if white plays concretely, he's doing fine with dc5 followed by knight d4, and this leads to a very imbalanced position where both sides have fair chances, though I certainly like black, and although you're welcome to have a preference of your own. I hope that you enjoyed this section, and I'll see you in the next chapter.